everybody. And welcome to the Three Rivers Community College Transform CSCU 2020 Town Hall Meeting. I am pleased to have Regent JoAnn Price, who is here. Please stand up so everyone can see you. President Gray, whom you all know. Joseph Tolisano from the Board of Regents, as well as Branchini, Three Rivers Campus Liaison for Transform. Thanks, Ann. As per this agenda, we're here to provide an overview of Transform 2020 and the benefits for Three Rivers students, as well as students at all of our institutions. At the end of this meeting, we will ask you to get involved more with Transform directly. Transform cannot succeed without participation of you and others, so we will be seeking your help. To begin, let me introduce the President of the Board of Regents, Dr. Gregory Gray.
Thank you. I can move around, right?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I prefer to do that than to be stuck behind the podium. Nice to be back here. I've been working for about 14 or 15 months, so I believe this was my 4th trip up. And my biggest regret is that I did miss your golf tournament last week, but I'm already signed up for next year. My compliments to all of you who have something to do with kind of this small community college raising so much external funding. That's pretty special. But we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about Transform. And my guess is most of you heard this, and the intent today is to let you know how it came about, what has happened, where we're at, where we're going, and how we really encourage and want your input in the process. So let me begin with a slide that Mike put in for me. There, this comment. Kind of an interesting slide. Let's go back on it. It's literally a true scenario of how this thing happened. I forget exactly when I was appointed president. Must have been, I think, April or May last year, for 2013. Yeah. And anyways, about that time, I'm sure many of you are aware that the governor made an announcement that he was going to provide $1.6 billion to UConn. Everybody knew that. So I'm sitting in my comfortable office back in California, kind of waiting to leave California and come here, and I started getting emails. I'm not sure if any of you were sending me emails, but literally yesterday when we were talking to the CSCU group, some of the crowd admitted that, yeah, they were one of the emailers to me, still when I was out in California. And basically the emails all said, you know, we're happy to have you coming to Connecticut, Dr. Gray, we look forward to working with you. Are you aware that Governor Malloy just gave $1.6 billion to UConn? What are you going to do? And it's almost that blunt, is what they said. So anyways, I knew that this was going on, and I did get here, and probably met with the governor July 2nd or 3rd, very quickly after I arrived, and I said, you know, our staff is wondering about this next gen and 1.6, and I like to think that we are the state system for higher education. And, you know, I didn't actually put my hand out and say, what about us? But that was the idea. And he said, where's your plan? Why should anyone give anyone anything without a plan? That logic you can't really, no, that's right. So all of a sudden, you started to see a seed being planted for a plan. So I went back and met with all of the college presidents and said, you know, it's very important we now begin to plan for the future because many things were happening. We were a brand new system. You all know better than I some of the rough spots that took place over the last 3 years in making us a system, where the community colleges, universities, and charter oak will become one, and hopefully have a synergistic effect on each by feeding off one another. That was an issue. Another issue, of course, had to do with money and finance, and how much money we will be able to get from the state. And how we're involved in a revolution now in higher education, of which most of us, I would suggest, have never seen before. We may talk about that in just a bit. So after meeting for a couple months, my staff came to me. They said, you know, Dr. Gray, we talked about this thing being the plan for much too long. Let's give it a name. And some of you may be familiar with that name at the time. It was called XLCT. Not bad. And it was about November when I went over and met with the governor, and I said, here it is. XLCT, a plan to take us into the future. He looked at it, looked at the bottom line, grimaced a little bit. And what happened then was that on a weekly and sometimes bi-weekly schedule, 3 or 4 people from his staff met with 3 or 4 people from my staff as we started to refine what the items and issues were involved in Transform, and of course how much money was involved. And all that took place up until 2 days before the State of the State address, at which time I was called over to his office, and I sat there with Ben Barnes, and we went through item by item what he was going to announce in the State of the State, which was to announce the plan and the financial support that he would provide. And as we were going through that, he looked at me and he said, you know, however, the state of Connecticut cannot have a plan for the future of higher education that's a spreadsheet. XLCT died, and Transform 220 was born, if you will. And that's how it came about. Now, 2 or 3 other important things as we kind of lay the foundation for our discussions today. The governor did mention it in the State of the State address pretty prominently. Basically committed $125 million to us at that time. 2 days later, he went out to Manchester Community College and there was a special press conference about Transform. It's a big deal, a lot of press coverage. And most importantly, the governor said on 5 occasions that this financial commitment is but a down payment to our system. So we have that on tape and recorded and everything else, but we all have to wait and see what happens in November. And so I came back and I started talking to the board that this was being approved, and that was a big deal, quite frankly. A deal that actually brings colleges together in the state of Connecticut that had never happened before. A plan to look out into the future of how we're not going to just be a combination of colleges, but one that really aspires to excellence. And I said to the board, we don't have the horses to put this together, we need help. They gave me approval then in March, I believe, to go out and bring a consultant in to help us map this thing out and get it ready to go. Indeed, this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal, opportunity, challenge, whatever word you would like to use. We put out an RFP, and as many of you may know, Boston Consulting was chosen as the group to come in. They come in April, and they've been working with us, and they have an office literally in our building every day since that time. And the progress we have made to date, I think, can be reflected back to their support of us. 2 things I would say about it, and then move to the next slide, is that there's confusion about what Boston Consulting is. They are our consultant. This plan that we're putting together is the state's system plan. It is not BCG. They are here to help. They are not a stakeholder, but they are here to help us. And from day one, we've always said if the plan that comes out, and we're going to talk about how this thing all becomes real at the end of the session, will be our plan. And I mean ours, not Greg Gray's, but literally ours, and that's part of the intent of the meeting today. Why are we doing it? Access and affordability. There's no question that our board now, I think more than ever, has a commitment to transform basic 3 characteristics. We are the state system, therefore we're going to be accessible, affordable, and by the way, when we do that, we're going to strive daily for unparalleled excellence. That first became very representative 2 months ago when the board approved a 2% tuition increase for next year. Probably one of the lowest in the country for next year. And they didn't like doing that. They are committed to keeping costs down and tuition down for our students. Obviously, and the community colleges play a very, very big role in this, becoming an economic engine. I've already today, in the last few minutes, had discussions with your Associate Dean for Workforce on advanced manufacturing and programs here at 3 Rivers. All of these are extremely important for the future economy of the state. We, the community colleges, are the ones that train advanced manufacturing jobs, and we have to figure out how to do more of it. We do a good job of it. We simply have to be able to hopefully double our enrollments in advanced manufacturing in the next year. And when it's all said and done, we want to improve the student experience. And one mechanical thing, before I ask JoAnn to say a couple words, is, well, how does this thing all start? There are 36 initiatives. Did we get copies of the initiatives?
Yes.
So you have paper copies of what those 36 initiatives are that make up Transform. And they are put into under 7 different categories. And basically my executive staff serve the role of executive sponsor for a series of initiatives. Half of them, at least, are in the academic affairs area. And Provost Urbano is the executive sponsor there, but he's helped by many presidents, including your president here, Mary Ellen. Thank you for doing that. And they are charged with the responsibility of shepherding these initiatives from conception, through process, through completion. And again, I'll get to the completion angle in a few minutes. Erica Steiner is the executive sponsor for revenue generation and overall efficiency and organization. Mike is doing the transparency and metrics executive sponsorship. Who am I missing? Keith Epstein is doing the facilities, of course. Joseph Tolisano, he's going to talk in a few minutes about IT. And so what we're going to see shortly, and I know they're trying to get me off here because I talk too much, is a couple illustrations for you of initiatives that are ongoing. So Joe's going to talk about IT, you're going to talk about metrics, and we'll get a flavor for that. So JoAnn's going to say a few words. I'll come up for a couple more seconds. Joe and Mike, and then at the end, we hope to have at least 45 minutes or so for questions, answers, and get a chance. Regent, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it, JoAnn.
Having said that, I'm going to be talking behind the podium. So from the number one, I've been on the Board of Regents about 6 or 7 months, and so it was a great time to start, because when you see something that's happening like this, that probably happens once in a generation, it's exciting to be able to have a whole system come together and to produce another level of excellence. And really, at the end of the day, when you come to work every day, you're looking to excellence. And in order to do that, it's very important that we're all working together as a team. And if the team is not working together, we do not have great results. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and it's a pleasure to sort of talk this briefly about what the Board of Regents hopes to achieve through Transform under the leadership of our president and, of course, the chair of the board. I work closely with Nick, and I have been very impressed by his excellence. And so it goes. So one of the things that we want to make sure that happens, and this is critical, is that the students have a successful first year. Because if the first year and at the universities, community colleges, wherever they start their education, if that's not a great experience, then many times we will lose them. And so it's very important that our young people start out strong and they feel that they're in a very competitive environment. Secondly, we want to graduate students. And the beautiful thing about integrating the community college system with the four-year system is that we know affordability is an issue. And that when young people know that they can get an excellent education starting at the community colleges and move on into the four-year colleges if they choose. But if they do not, they also have an opportunity to pursue other excellent opportunities. And that is a wonderful aspect of our community college system and all of the flexibility that you have. I met the nursing team as I was introducing myself, and to think that you can get your associate's degree and then you can go on and get your four-year degree. And I think that that's very important, that we have a fully integrated, successful operating system, and it becomes the bellwether for the country. Third, affordability, and that's always an issue. But what is so excellent about Connecticut is that our state system is an excellent product at a lower cost. And for us to be able to continue to do that is a wonderful opportunity, and I think Transform will enable us to do even a better job in that area. And then innovation. Now, I'm in the venture capital business in terms of my day-to-day job, and innovation is what is happening in this country and in the world. And we have to train and teach our young people not to just compete with other students in Connecticut, but they have to compete with students not just in this country, but they have to be prepared to compete with young people all over the world. And so the fact that we are investing these types of resources in our young people is really exciting and should attract young people from other states, not just the state of Connecticut. And then finally, and what's very, very important to the Regents and then to me personally, is that we have to be able to speak effectively to diversity in the state of Connecticut and across the country. Now, in my company, we have 5 or 6 different nationalities and ethnic groups, and they speak 10 languages. Some of them came from other countries, and they had never been to the United States. And their first year at Yale and Princeton and places like that, that was the first time they set foot in this country. So that talks about how our young people have to be able to compete and how we have to be able to work with all cultures and all people. And so diversity and being able to be a welcoming state to this country's great diversity and all that people have to offer is very, very important to the Board of Regents. We want to see that in our student body, and we want to see that reflected in our faculty. So we're very excited about what's happening. We think that we have to work together with a team. It's critical that we have authentic conversations with each other. And as I say at church, it's important to have the discussions at the church meeting and not in the parking lot. So that we're excited about everything that's happening, and we encourage your open and frank conversations. Thank you very much.
JoAnn, very much. Probably a decent segue to let you know, unfortunately I have to leave about 20 after 12:30 today because I got called in to testify in front of the Affirmative Action Commission today. The good news is, a year ago our Affirmative Action Plan was put on probation, and we had to do things to improve on it. Good news is, unless something happens, not only did we have approved in total, but for a 2-year program, which is the max they can give us. So they want me to show up, and I hope that's the outcome. That's why we're meeting. So you get down, Transform's happening. I think simply by having a Board of Regents at every meeting, it really reflects their commitment to transform. And the question is why? Well, I think at the end of the day, when I go to bed at night, and I hope the same is for you, that I'm a teacher. You know, I do this, I do that, but why am I working at a college in an environment that really celebrates learning? It's because we're teachers. We want to make sure that we make college available to everyone who can benefit from it. Our community colleges collectively are a great illustration of that. Better educated, highly skilled graduates, so important in tomorrow's workforce. And that's why the mission of the community colleges in this state, and relative to allied health and some of the programs you have in advanced manufacturing, it sounds corny, but the fact is the economy of the state of Connecticut, to a certain extent, is going to be dependent upon how well we do in preparing that workforce. I've heard horror stories from this part of the state where manufacturers say they had to turn away business contracts that would have come to Connecticut because they don't have the workforce in manufacturing to accommodate. We got to stop that, and I have a task force that's getting together, and hopefully very, very quickly we can increase and improve the enrollments in manufacturing. Transform will improve facilities in a market way. Joe's going to talk about that in a few minutes. Insulate the system from adverse budget in the state. Probably if anything worries me more than anything else in Transform, that's it. We are a state entity. And you know, again, I'm a little bit of an accountant, but what I understand is revenues and expenses need to balance one another off. State's giving us less revenue. Our board has made a commitment that the additional expense of college will not be transferred to the student. So somewhere in between, we have to figure out how to be more efficient, and that is indeed part of Transform, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Stay ahead of the higher education revolution. Anyone in here been in higher ed more than 30 years? Maybe I shouldn't ask. 35? Well, you and I are about in the same ball. I'm here to say that 35 years ago, 25 years ago, 5 years ago, we did not appreciate what was about to happen in higher education. We are in the midst of a revolution. When you see things happening across the country that you would have never thought of 5 years ago. If you pay attention to the state of California, the judicial system has outlawed tenure in California. If you pay attention to what's going on in Tennessee, they think community colleges are so vital to the workforce, free tuition. Probably we, collectively with Transform, have the most ambitious plan going forward, but there is a revolution going on, MOOCs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can be intimidated by it, you can embrace it, and I hope that you think it's fun. Because I'm not exactly sure why God put us all together at this moment in time, but what we have an opportunity to do in the state of Connecticut for higher education is really amazing. And not only will your kids, but I'm sure your grandkids will feel the impact of the decisions we make over the next several months in Transform. And so this is what it's all about. This is one of the things that really came out of the Regents workshop. They had a workshop about a month or two ago, and they talked about Transform, and they wanted to really highlight something, and they wanted something that would be kind of the showpiece, the banner for Transform. That's it. And you look right in the middle, and people say, why are we doing this? When a legislator says, why are we doing this? When a business person says, why are we doing this? When a disgruntled faculty member says, why are we doing this? That's why we're doing it. We are here as teachers to provide learning environment and experience for students. And then if you look at the blocks around the students, you'll see how that is impacted. Regent Price mentioned affordability. Having the lowest tuition in Connecticut is certainly where we're at today. Keeping it low in the future is going to be a #1 priority. Quality student experiences, some really neat things that are part of the academic agenda in Transform that we won't have time to get into today, but I welcome and encourage your involvement in that. Expanding international programs, early college programs, some of the things you are doing here, and then preparing the workforce for tomorrow. So this is all about students, and I want to now turn it over to Mike and then Joe, because what they're going to do is share with you 2 of the initiatives that have happened so far. And one of the questions we had yesterday, well, if you're sharing these initiatives and what you have done, why ask us for this input? And I think it's a legitimate question. But I would say to you that by doing the work that we've done now, it allows us to put on the table some very concrete ideas. So we're not starting from scratch, we're not taking things out of the sky. A lot of work has been done, and now is the time to refine them and bring them to fruition. And again, I will get into that when these 2 gentlemen are done.
Thank you, Dr. Gregg. I'm actually Mike. So this slide here, we thought it was a good one to start off with after the introductions, because this slide demonstrates or shows to you all of the interested groups and the affected groups, perhaps more importantly, who have been brought into the orbit of Transform since it began taking shape earlier in this year. And for those of you who didn't bring your reading glasses or can't see from a distance, I'll just walk you around this slide. First of all, obviously, the Board of Regents, people like Regent Price and her colleagues on the board, were very instrumental and very active on the front end of this thing, making key decisions about policy and direction. Secondly, we began to bring faculty and staff into this sometime shortly after I arrived at the Board of Regents, which was the beginning of May. But we did that by kicking off meetings with faculty and staff, and also by doing a very, very important faculty and staff survey, which perhaps many of you in this room participated in or responded to. So early on, we knew we needed to bring faculty and staff into this in a meaningful way. Students. Students have been a part of it largely at this point as represented by the student advisory or student SAC, Student Advisory Committee. But we're going to be doing more with students in the next 30 to 45 days, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, in Connecticut, you can't do anything without getting the legislature involved. Sometimes they get involved because they read it in the paper, and trust me, that's the worst way for the legislature to get involved. But we also, through our legislative liaison, have reached out to the leadership of the cognizant committees and gotten them involved in an informational way so far with what Transform is all about. The presidents of our campuses, President Jukoski, all the other presidents of the remaining 16 institutions have been marching in lockstep with us on Transform from the very beginning. They've had not only an opportunity to hear what we're doing, but in a very real way, they've had an opportunity to shape what we're doing. Because as Dr. Gray indicated before, to a separate conversation that he was having, this isn't the Board of Regents' plan to own and to manage. This is our plan to help design and deliver, but this is the plan for the institutions to take over and to manage and to implement going forward, obviously with our help. And the final circle you'll see there is the business and civic communities. We think the business and civic community is an equal partner with all of these other groups that I mentioned, largely because we are so involved in helping to provide a workforce for them for the future. And so we have engaged them in individual conversations. John Rathgaber from the Connecticut Business and Industry Association is on our executive steering committee. We've done a lot with business in that way. But we did one other thing with the business community, which echoes what we did for the faculty and staff, which is we also did a business and civic community survey, which Dr. Gray is going to be talking a little bit more about in a few minutes. So these are the stakeholders that we've brought in and are currently working with at this point very actively. I mentioned I would come back to students because we want students to play an even larger role in this. As Dr. Gray said on the value proposition, this is all about the students. If you remember nothing else from this morning, please remember that the center portion of that value proposition was the word students. We keep our eye on that every year. In the next month, beginning in October, we're going to be doing student roundtables. Going out, excuse me, yes, we will be doing this again in October. We will be going out to each institution and meeting with interested students who want to have a part in helping to shape the remainder of Transform because they are such a large part of it. Following those roundtables, when we hope not only to get their input, but also to create greater awareness and interest in Transform, we will also be doing a student survey to all students, regardless of whether they participate in the roundtable. Again, all designed to try and elicit as much information and input as possible, because I think, as you're all aware, if a plan doesn't involve the interested and effective groups, the plan's not going to succeed. So that's a little bit about that section. Now I'd like to talk just about where we are at this moment with Transform. There's been a lot of work that's gone into it, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation with Dr. Gray, starting in California over a year ago. Right now, in fall of 2014, as I just indicated, we're continuing to gather stakeholder input. At the same time, the leadership team who is working on the various academic clusters and the various initiatives are also continuing to refine and develop those initiatives. Some of them have been active for a couple of months. Some of them, the planning process is just getting underway, and there won't really be implementation steps developed for months to come, and some of them maybe not for a year or so. But the leadership group for the initiatives is in fact engaged in that right now. In December, we have a date with the board in which we will present to them the status of the initiatives at that time and our proposed plan for implementing the remainder of Transform. That's sort of our first major touch point with the board at the end of this year. And then following December into the new year, probably sometime in the first quarter, we will also develop a status report of where Transform what the initiatives look like, what the plan for implementing them is. And that's going to be a plan that we will release not only to the board, who will consider it at that time, but once they've considered it and nodded an approval or asked us for modifications, then that plan will also become part of the public discussion among all the affected groups and the interested groups for Transform. So that's where we are right now. There's been a lot of work that's happened just since May 2nd when I arrived at the BOR, but obviously we're at the front end of this thing. The only other thing I want to say with respect to the timetable is people tend to look at plans as having a beginning and an end. It's important to point out that Transform doesn't have an end. At least we don't see it at this point. Transform is now an organic movement that's going to continue on for as long as we're at the Board of Regents and for as long as the system remains as an organization. Because it's an organization that has to change based on external imperatives, based on the needs of the state, based on the needs, again, of our students. So, what are these initiatives? The list that you have in your hands and the list that you see on the screen, this is the first of 3 slides, by the way, will give you a sense of where the initiatives are focused and where they're directed. And the first slide that you see in front of you represents the first group of initiatives in the academic cluster. And it's very important to point out, I'm not going to go through these line by line because you have them and you can review them at your leisure. But I think it's very important for you to understand that in looking at the academic cluster, we're looking at all phases of the student experience. It isn't just how to improve professional development. It isn't just how to manage or increase the use of distance learning or online course opportunities. It's academic advising, it's program optimization, it's centers of excellence, it's strengthening the liberal arts core, it's providing a workforce for tomorrow, which you will see on this slide at the bottom. So it's all about the entire student experience. So I think it's important for you at your leisure again to take a walk through these initiatives and see what you see there, see how wide-ranging and broad this plan is, and there's another selfish reason for walking you through these right now. At some point in this meeting, we're going to ask you for your help. That's going to be our call to action at the end of this. We're going to ask you to get involved in this plan. Because as I said before, without the stakeholders being involved, the plan doesn't succeed. So take a look through these, see what you think, see where they're focused. And then the last thing I'll say about these slides is over in the right-hand column, you'll see a fairly daunting category called executive sponsor. Executive sponsor is simply the member of the executive team who is responsible for either that cluster or that set of initiatives. And the reason we put this slide up here is because we've attached the emails for all of these sponsors. And we did that because we want you, when you become involved or asked to get involved, that you reach out to us through this email address and tell us where you're interested in getting involved and how you'd like to participate. And I believe there's also response cards here for you to fill in. That's another means of doing this. If you don't reach out directly to me or to Joe Tolisano, for example, or any of the other sponsors, through these emails, we'll get back to you based on the response cards that you submit to us. So please take an active role in this. Please decide to get involved and to participate because this process is at the beginning and it's at a very key and important place for you to begin to have your voice heard. Okay, so as I said before, we're not going to go individually through each of these initiatives, but we did want to give you a sense of the flavor of 2 of the initiatives just to perhaps give you some insight into how this process is working with respect to the initiatives. So this one is all about shared metrics. And the best way to begin talking about shared metrics, which by the way I promise I will only do for about 2 minutes, is to think about if we want to track performance, there's no way we can track performance if we don't have the metrics to do that. And so what has happened over the past few months is an initiative team comprised of our institutional research director right now, and also other IR people from around the campuses, have been engaged in developing metrics to help us track performance. And it isn't just performance of the system office, although that's a big part of it, but it's also to track the performance of the institutions and how they're achieving their goals as part of their own strategic plans, but also as part of the transform. And so what was arrived at was a list of 25 metrics, which they arrived at by looking around the country, looking around the state, looking at metrics that the Board of Directors had previously approved about a year ago, and determining whether those needed to be augmented. And so at this point, as I mentioned, there's 25 metrics. Those metrics are things like how to quantify success for first-year students, how to increase graduation rates, how to increase retention, how once they're in the system, do we keep them in the system, and things like that. What will happen at this point is beginning next year, campuses will begin to look at their performance relative to themselves. How are we doing versus last year? And that will begin roughly in the first quarter of 2015. Next, they're going to look at themselves as compared to some institutional targets that presidents and President Gray and others on his team will begin to develop for all of the institutions. The third is they're going to begin to look at themselves end of next year compared to other campuses that are like them. So for example, a Manchester may compare itself to another community college. A Three Rivers may compare itself to another community college. Again, based on standards that are designed for that particular type of campus. Western will compare itself to Central, Southern and Central Southern, and the university. So those are the types of comparisons that will begin to go on at the end of next year. And then the last piece of the metrics puzzle is comparing the universities and the college campuses to their peer groups around the country. I understand from the head of the IR team in our office that roughly in the last year and a half or so, the various campuses developed their own peer groups as to who they would like to, or whom they would like to be compared to, or who they should be compared to at this moment. So it's not only looking at who's out there, but it's also aspirational. And sometime in the beginning of 2016, that comparison, that metric, that measurement process will begin. So you see it's a 4-phase metric process, beginning sometime in the first quarter of 2015, and then on an annual basis after that. So that's what metrics is all about. Now I perhaps will turn you over to something that's more interesting to you than metrics, and that's IT and smart classrooms.
Good morning. It's nice to be on a community college campus where informational work happens on a daily basis. I spent my 17th year in higher ed, 11 of them more as a CIO of a community college, and my hats are off to the work that you do. So, smart classrooms. As with most of the initiatives, this is in the planning stage. I've got a group of stakeholders, a diverse group of stakeholders who've been working this issue and came up with concepts that will enhance the technology we use on a daily basis in the classroom. They've come up with a menu of 12 different types of smart classrooms that you can choose from. We will block grant the money to the institution based on your FTE, and then you will apply through a grant process to grab the money and build out your smart classroom. The reason we have a grant process is we want to make sure facilities, because there's infrastructure issues, the provost or dean of administration, dean of faculty has say, the president has say, and we have a process to make sure that you can apply one of those 12s to your campus. We're developing standards to be used, and we have to clean up the infrastructure to support 21st century classrooms. The majority of what we do every day runs on the network on this campus, the wide area network that supports all 17, and the World Wide Web. So those pieces all have to fit together precisely for this to work the way it should work. It's a digital extension of the classroom. Students today come to the universities and colleges on average, according to Gartner, with 3 devices, 3 mobile devices. It is a digital generation. By 2020, they will come with 5 devices. They expect to get content delivered digitally. That's how they've grown up. That's how they learn. So we need to move that pendulum in that direction. And we want to do that by leveraging some cloud. We want to record with the faculty's permission some of these lectures that are more complex, put them in the cloud, let them review them before their assessment process begins. That has to be worked through the faculty, the provost, and leveraging the technology. It's about enhancing access so that they can get access 24/7. They do most of their homework when we're all in bed. They go to class in the late afternoon and evenings, and they sleep till 2 in the afternoon. So it's a different paradigm than when I went to school. And it's about access. We want them to have access to course availability, not only at this campus, but hopefully in the future at all 17. I talked to you about the block grant process. I talked to you about the 12 variations. There are some little controversial issues about video conferencing. The video conferencing piece of the Smart Classroom Initiative is very small. It will be done on a pilot basis. If you have 6 students here taking German, and possibly there are 6 at Snuntic, we may try to leverage the technology to get 2 for 1, again, with the faculty permission. So we're looking to do that on a pilot basis, but it is not the silver bullet that the rumor mill has associated with this. So we assembled a team to find a mission scope, conducted some brainstorming sessions. 15 people are involved on this team, faculty, students, got to have a librarian, have a legitimate process in place, media specialists. So we've got a good team. They did some research, peer research from George Washington University that basically wrote the book on this. And that's where we lifted a lot of the information you'll see as this thing unfolds. They looked at current technologies, the portfolios that are available, looked at contracts. As you know, in this state, there are 38 pages of terms and conditions on how you can do business with the state of Connecticut. So we make sure that the contracts we're leveraging meet those requirements. And we've met with vendors and they've done some tours. The next step is to create this e-learning ecosystem. So we have to be able to train you on its use. It has to be assessed. There has to be the availability of metrics to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So it's the whole loop of how we're going to feed and care for this initiative. Well, we have to align, as I said, with the other transform goals. The network is the key. This college has a fairly new network, but many of the other colleges, their network is at end of life. So they have to all dovetail and be timed together appropriately to meet the overall goals. And as I said, classroom innovation across multiple mobile platforms. 3 devices today, 5 devices, all mobile by 2020. Am I hitting the button? I don't know if I'm sure you do. All right, so here's where we are. March, we assembled the team. This summer, they did some organizational work and planning to find the 12 types that we're looking at. We will build one of those 12 types at each campus. It's up to you on picking the one you want. We'll run an institutional pilot in the spring, and then we'll release the floodgates in the summer. So at this point, I will turn it back over to the president, who will take you to the end, and we'll answer your questions. Thank you.
Really, before we really get to the most important part of the program, which is your participation, I did want to mention 2 quick things. One, if you just listen to Joe, you can see that this thing is moving. Most of us come from the academic arena. And we talk. And we talk. This is much more a plan of action. And probably you're seeing a little bit of the Boston Consulting influence. This thing moves. Give everyone the opportunity. And what I want to share with you is how it becomes real. About 2 or 3 months ago, I was sitting in front of the Higher Education Committee over on the Hill, and Roberta Wells, the chairman, basically looked me in the eye, and if you know Roberta, pointed her finger at me and said, "We're giving you all this money. How can you promise us that it's going to result in something. Because we've given a lot of money to other institutions and it evaporates into the air. And I said to her, we have a plan and we'll do that. Last week, I had a chance to go back in front of that same committee, and at the end of the presentation, I said, you know, Representative Willis, this has been haunting me for 3 months. So let me share with you how it becomes real, and it's a story that I told to Roberta that I'll now share with you. As you now know, there are 36 initiatives. I have 7 executives who are responsible for making sure those initiatives percolate. And the question is, where do they percolate to? Transform has an executive steering committee of 6 people. It is made up of me, Nick D'Onofrio, a guy by the name of Jay Puckett, who represents BCG in the committee for processes. It's made up of Catherine Smith, who's the Commissioner for Economic Development, made up of John Rathgerber, who's the President of CBIA, and a faculty member, who I thank for being here today, Dr. Shirley Jackson from Southern. And so, before anything kind of gets out for ultimate implementation, it has to work its way up through the Executive Steering Committee. And the Executive Steering Committee doesn't have minutes and resolve yes and no. They give a shake of the head, basically. And so it's already beginning to happen. And I'll give you an example, and I always use Joe. He was ahead of the curve and brought together some initiatives to the Executive Steering Committee that were well-founded, well thought out. Executive Steering Committee met, talked about it, and they did shake their head. That way. Which meant Joe had to go back, regroup a little bit, talk to his committees, and about a week ago he brought back the recommendations that the committee put together, and I said to Joe, probably the steering committee at that time gave you about a half of a downward thought. So these executive steering committees are very important, and all 36 initiatives will be working their way through. Part 1 of the process of how it becomes real. The second and very important part is that in January, key date, we will deliver to the Board of Regents a document. I hate to call it the plan because, as Mike indicated earlier, the plan is evolving and dynamic and ever-changing. So what will be delivered to the Board of Regents in January is in that moment of time, January 2015, this is where we are with Transform. And I talked to Chairman D'Onofrio a little bit about that. And I do want you to know, by the way, the board has never given me any deadlines or dates on this process. They've been kind of self-imposed. And I do think we're going to make January because, as you can see, momentum is here and processes are in place to make it happen. But I think Nick and the board will say, thank you guys for doing this. We're going to hold it for a month or 2 and give all the stakeholders a final opportunity to look at the plan in its totality. Because up until that point, people looked at this section, that section, but never in totality. And then in March, I think the board will adopt it. And then after that, we start working again. Because remember what they're adopting. They're adopting a plan, which needs executed. So I see a lot of you becoming quite involved, not just with the planning, but when the plan is done and committed and approved by the board, you'll become part of the execution teams in all 36 of these things. So that's what I wanted to tell you about how it's going to be real. And I do think it will be real and it will happen. And finally, we get to the point that is most important in today's presentation. Questions, comments, input. We have microphones, I assume, around. Please. Oh, we're going to let you first. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Basically, what I just wanted to share with you is a slide up there that talks about how Transform will take shape on our campus. And all of you know when we had Professional Development Day and when we had Convocation, I shared with you that the senior team is working on a strategic plan document that will combine the initiatives of Transform 2020 with what we are doing here at Three Rivers. And you will probably get a copy of a draft document by the end of the month. But this just gives you an example of how Three Rivers is involved in terms of looking at Transform 2020 and then what we are doing to implement some of those ideas here on campus. And without further ado, I'll pass it back to Dr. Gray, President Gray.
Please, questions, comments?
My name is Laura Chin. I'm the Director of Institutional Research here at Rivers. It was actually kind of funny when you were talking about metrics, the measurements. I noticed people were looking back at me. So my question is, I know that we talked about the first quarter of next year will be individual campus comparing ourselves with our past performance and try to really fine-tune the metrics. And the next phase is comparing ourselves with peer community college within our group. And my question is, it's very important for the community college to have a standardized set of metrics so that how Three River defines what measures student learning outcome is the same as, say, Manchester. So we're not producing data based on different interpretation, and therefore not comparing apple to apple. And the same with comparing with our peer colleges nationwide. Actually, Professor here actually made a pretty good point that some of our peer comparison colleges may have different emphasis on what they're trying to do. Rather than concentrating on transferring to 4 colleges, they may be more concentrating on producing vocational degrees. So we have to be very careful when it comes to comparing these peers.
I think it's a great comment. I agree fully with you. It's important that we're able to somehow now put our efforts into a quantitative format and try to figure out if we're doing well, not so well. But I would ask you to do this. Remember, this plan is not done. This is where we're at today. We need you, and I'm serious about this, to become engaged in this process now that we're to this point. Because they got some good ideas. You may agree that the 25 metrics are the ones we should have, maybe we should add or subtract. Actually, it was all started, this whole process began with 675 potential metrics. And they worked itself down to what we thought were, that's not even what your issue happens to be. And I think the committee has really spent a lot of time figuring out what the 25 are, but your participation and contribution will be extremely important. I hope you fill out the card and get a hold of Bill now.
Oh, thank you. Mine's a little different from the strategic standpoint. I'm going to be generous and say 1 out of 3 students transfer. Your predecessor, Dr. Austin, said we were in the top 5 or 10 in his IR guide said about that in transfer from community to 4-year institutions. My IR director last year gave me data that said 56% of our students that registered leave essentially with nothing. I'm looking back to Connecticut, and if you go back to the 60s when they developed the Technical Institute and then the state technical colleges, focus was 2 years and work. This focus is 2 years of transfer. I do a lot in the business, and what they're telling me is they have a need for 2-year graduates, not 4-year graduates. And my question is, what is this going to do for developing advanced vocational development technical training?
I'd like to spend the next half hour talking about this, but I'll try to make it very short because I think it's going to do an awful lot. 2 or 3 of the initiatives are all about workforce development and the kinds of issues you talked about. There's a recent study that was articulated in the Wall Street Journal that 4 states have community colleges now where the graduates of the community college make more than the baccalaureate students. Kind of what you're saying. But it goes beyond that. So, and again, I welcome your input, but Wilfredo Neves, President Neves, is in charge of the workforce things, and they're just actually getting started, probably behind where many of the others are, because it's critical in this state, and the community colleges really play a role, and to me, then it gets down to enrollment management headcount. You mentioned the word transfer. Transform has a lot in it about transfer students. We're going through a study now that shows how many of our associate degree students left us and went someplace else. Either before they got their degree or upon completion of their associate degree, they did not stay in-house. One of the initiatives in Transform is to give every associate degree graduate a scholarship if they continue at the 4-year universities of our system. Not UConn, not Yale, ours. McGuire studies that were completed a while back indicated that transfer students, if given $1,000 are about 50% more likely to attend your university than go someplace else. There's a whole bunch of reasons to do that. And it also helps the community colleges for completion, because the deal doesn't count unless you get your associate degree. So theoretically, instead of leaving the 45 credits and going to CSCU, no, I'm going to hang around and get the associate degree, and then I'm going to go and I'll be eligible for one of those things. But it is indeed part of enrollment management. And the final thing I'll say, which I am most adamant about, we will never have a system for higher education until we fix articulation between curriculum and the community colleges and the Board of Universities. So committed to that I've agreed with my Board of Regents about Greg Gray and his evaluation this year. My evaluation says that June 30th, 2015, when they do my evaluation, the articulation will be totally completed for community colleges and universities. That's an ambitious goal. So I have my folks working on it. They say it's pretty ambitious. We may not get the whole way there, but darn it, we better get a long way, because the idea that you graduate from Three Rivers and for some reason you're not getting the regular transfer deal at our places, it's just totally wrong. So we're going to fix that. And I could go on and on about that, but I want to give others to talk about other issues.
Good morning. I'm Alan Anderson. I'm a full-time faculty member of the computer science program, and along with George, we're co-chairs. We've got a strong program here. We've got an excellent articulation agreement with Eastern. So one of our views of Transform 2020, or getting ready for it as part of our pathways, is to ensure that we can have the same type articulation agreement with the other three state universities and potentially charter oaks. We see our program as really an alternative, a cost-effective alternative for the first 2 years for computer science students. We want our program to be viewed as good or better, more rigorous even, than the first 2 years at State University. The second thing that we want to see is, as part of our Gen Ed requirements, to see that computer science becomes an option for the scientific knowledge and reasoning. My question is, what assurances do we have that the 4 state universities are really going to take us serious about this and, really work to help us establish our program and articulate with all 4 state universities?
Well, you heard about my evaluation. Trust me what I put into the university president's evaluation. Now, having said that, we work in an academic institution where faculty control the curriculum. And so it's up to me and the presidents to make sure the faculty see this as wise. And you know what? Generally they do. I haven't run into any university faculty who's really against this. We just have not really had the wherewithal, the initiative to finish the job. And we're about to finish the job. But when you go beyond that, there's all kinds of things we can do systematically, I think. Computer science, and you have a group of students up here that want to take computer science XYZ that you don't offer. Then you pick it up in your smart classroom from Eastern or Western. That will be doable in a test form as early as this spring. And if we can get into an educational pedagogical paradigm like that, it really starts making a system where we truly utilize the resources on this place and that place, and forget about whether you're called a community college or university, or forget about that. Where's the best education, and how can we most efficiently and effectively offer these courses? So the other thing, by the way, is that the Gen Ed stuff you're talking about is one overall initiative that's listed in Transform. So it, by itself, is an initiative that we worked on, and I'm sure there are community college folks in those initiative teams as well as university people. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Diva Conbureau, and I'm with Engineering Technology Program. I have many questions, but I'll only ask one. We know that the Engineering Technologies is an expensive program, and we know that it has lower enrollment than all the other programs. However, we also know that President Obama, along with many others, the governor, we need these engineering technology programs, not just for workforce development, because many of my students transfer. But we need these programs for the infrastructure of Connecticut and the United States. If we have low enrollment and we're being expected to have a certain amount of enrollment, what will we do as far as engineering technologies? Are we going to do away with the program? We have the most engineering technology programs out of any community college in Connecticut, including nuclear, environmental, civil, manufacturing, mechanical, laser technology. Our enrollments are not going to be as high as liberal arts and sciences or business or whatever. Are we going to continue to run those programs and keep those programs intact? Are we going to find a way to bring students into those programs? Thanks.
Find a way is important. You know, I've met President Obama a couple times and come see him, so I'm more interested in our two college presidents at Quinnipiac Valley and here at Three Rivers and what they think about this, because it is an issue. You understand dollars and cents, but you see, I do believe, and I sincerely believe this, that part of the technology that Joe's talking about helps us to do this. And therefore, Three Rivers, in conjunction with any other of our colleges, can jointly have programs where you teach some of the classes and maybe get 20 in a class, instead of trying to teach 4 classes and get 40 each in a class. As an example. Secondly, obviously, the business and economic development impact that the state of Connecticut has on our curriculum and the need for jobs has to be considered. Thirdly, I think you're familiar perhaps with the P-TECH programs that we're trying to get started in the state, the IBM model program that is now in operation at Norwalk. And you have 1 or 2 up here that you're thinking about, I believe, and Quinnipiac Valley does. But it's the idea where you start really, and I mean really working with 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders in either the technical schools or the high schools, leading up to careers in engineering technology. And the P-TECH model actually, when a student enrolls, and we have about 100 of them down at Norwalk right now, gets an IBM employee as a mentor for the entire 6 years. During the 6-year period, they get an IBM internship. And when they achieve their associate degree, they get job preference at IBM. This is a big deal. And we had to fight hard to get it. But we are going to be setting up P-TECH type programs with various industries throughout the state and having good relationships with schools. This starts to answer 2 questions, in my opinion. One is very directly related to the answer to your question. Getting more young people to understand the value of this technology program. The second thing, and I do believe this will happen 2 or 3 years down the road, is that the P-TECH model will go beyond the community colleges and to Central. You know, Jack Miller's interested in tying into this in terms of the engineering program. The third thing it does is something too near and too dear to all of our hearts. It perhaps reduces the need for remediation. The students who go through these type programs are usually prepared for a collegiate experience, and we don't have to do that kind of stuff. So, Transform will not cure that in January. Transform will hopefully have roadmaps that will see to it and push it into the future. One of the things I failed to mention to you, and I should, that this document that we're putting together in January will be backed up by 36 roadmaps. There are 36 initiatives. And one of the things BCG has taught us is what a roadmap is and how important it is. A roadmap basically is a journey, where you are in the process, where you're going to go, what are the benchmarks for success. Some roadmaps and Transform won't even begin their journey probably until 2016. I am pleased to tell you that we've already reached our destination with one of our initiatives. Anyone know the answer to which one? Academic calendar, that's right. So that roadmap started a while back, it's done, it's over. Check it off, we got 35 more to deal with. But the one that you're talking about is a long road. And I mean 3 to 5 years, but I guarantee you're not going to find that destination unless we plan it out now. Yes?
My name is Sheila Skane, and I run the early childhood education programs here. I'm going to focus on equity issues and workforce issues. About 20 years ago in the state of Connecticut, some colleges were selected to run very high-quality lab schools. Three Rivers was not part of that, as will probably half of the colleges do not have a lab school to fund them. In terms of us trying to develop like a center of excellence in education, it's really hard for me to compete with other colleges when I don't have someone with a PhD who studied radiobiology running our lab school. Our lab school is run by student services, and we have very limited academic experiences with it. And I'm just wondering, in terms of building a workforce, for example, you know, if we had a school and we work with 3 private school districts, Norwich alone has 37 different languages. If we could work somehow, we're going to need money to make it more equitable among the colleges and in terms of ultimate success for our students. So there's that.
Again, it's a roadmap that has a long destination, but you have to start somewhere. But this is being a system. For example, if you're looking for PhDs in education, we have Willimantic up there, and their ability to come to a campus and help. You know, and some of you will really be interested in this, and no decisions have been made, but Three Rivers is one I believe that's interested in getting the baccalaureate, the BSN in nursing. I asked, why would we do that when we have baccalaureate degrees in nursing at our universities? Can't we as a system figure out how to share those resources between the universities and the colleges? That type of answer is, I think, how that may happen. It's not going to happen in our foreseeable future by the state or anyone else investing a whole bunch of money in here. I mean, that's kind of real. The idea that we can leverage the resources that we really have collectively with personnel and faculty may give you some hope. I got time for about 2 more, but these guys can answer the questions, quite frankly, as well as I can. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Meg. I don't know if I need this. I'm Meg Wickster. I'm a retention specialist and do advisory and counseling. And I've worked the last 3 years with the grants from the Office of Higher Education for our first generation lower income students. And I'm very excited about the action plan. The point I guess I want to underscore is we have the articulation, all this articulation going on with the 4 universities. Equally, or maybe more critically important in my mind, is articulation with our high schools. Not just in specialized programs, but throughout. Starting early, not in senior year. Not rich for outcomes, starting at the end of senior year. Our students, we're fighting with one hand behind our back. Our students are not coming in ready to be college students, either in their expectations, academic habits, time management, strength of purpose, etc. I think we need to start in 8th grade. Many of them get trapped, right? Long before they're ever ready for college. We're open admission. But how can we help them be college ready? And that is where I feel we need lots of strength, lots of focus, and articulate the higher education system with our public schools.
Ditto. 2 major initiatives in Transform that, if you're not aware of, you need to look great, is the early college program. And it's where our hope is that all the community colleges will be working with as many of their feeder schools as possible to bring that joint curriculum together. And Robin Gold, I don't know if you've met her yet, and if you haven't, you need to track her down. She spearheads that out of the system office. And you talked a little bit about your role as advising. You saw out there today that advisement is a major initiative. It's interesting, yesterday out at Central. Central is one of the few colleges that enrollment is up. The number of freshmen they brought in is down. We're doing a better job of retention. Something we all need to think about and learn from. And a lot of our folks are convinced that we need to reinforce vigorously the number of advisors that's out there.
Yes, we heard that. Great.
One more for me. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, President Gray. I'm Edie Roulette, Acting Director of Nursing here at Three Rivers.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to meet another nurse. Did you ever hear about my nursing career?
You actually...
Oh, you heard that. So. All right.
The RN to BSN is really a workforce issue. 60% of the nurses practicing, actually across the country, are less than a baccalaureate or And there are a couple different reasons that we need to keep the associate degree access intact. The associate degree access allows us to educate a nurse that mirrors the community. They come from the community, they're educated in the community, and they stay in the community. So it is so important to keep associate degree education intact. With that said, we truly understand in the profession that nurses need to be educated to the baccalaureate level and greater. For that reason, we are working tirelessly with our CSCU partners. We have a meeting this Friday with Southern, and then a follow-up meeting with the whole CSCU on the 19th to really work at those articulation agreements. And what I would ask the Board of Regents is, how do we overcome some of these course articulation challenges, if you will, with the LEP that they have at Southern? It really puts a barrier for the student to choose a CSU partner. I have private institutions that will take every single one of our credits and more, but they're so expensive.
Well, that was the soapbox I was standing on earlier as a debates here. And so transfer and articulation goes much further than just gen ed. I mean, you're talking about it right now, and a very good example. Now, me, I have to make sure the presidents are on board. And by the way, part of this is not academic. You're talking about headcount. In an environment where your enrollments are going down, to me, as the president of the university, this is a no-brainer. I got to figure this out. Secondly, faculty, of course, control the curriculum. And my lead guy on it is Gargano. So the moment that you see an issue, I don't know if you know him, but he'll be on top of it, so please do that. And I do apologize, legislators over on the Hill call, so I better be there. But thank you. One of the things I said to Central yesterday, I say to you, I really take great pleasure in coming out here because I like to say I'm a teacher, and you know, they stuck me in a place now where I never get to see faculty or students. And I really kind of enjoy it. I like to see the enthusiasm when I walk up the halls, the smiles. And what I'd ask you to do with Transform is, you know, embrace the idea, the celebration that you have a fabulous job. You get literally to change the lives of people, which ultimately impacts the quality of life in Connecticut. That's not corny, that's real. So never lose that objective of being a teacher in this area, in this community college. And I would ask you to keep up the good work. Please become involved where you can with Transform, because you know, you don't want to look back in March and say, what happened? Because it's happening, and we encourage your participation. I'll give you back to the president. I have to take off, sorry.
Thank you, Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
I'm Louise, I'm from HR here, and when I look at the areas to get involved in, one of the areas is workforce initiatives and development. So from HR, my question is, what about the internal workforce? Because that's really an external slant. We have a huge workforce. Who are we as the workforce for tomorrow? What are we going to look like? I attended a meeting in June with my colleagues from the CSUs dealing with sharing of services and functions, things that would be regionalized, things that would be at the campus level, things that would be at the system level. And I think there's a huge impact within this that I think we need, more people really need to be aware. Sorry if my back to so many of you. But I think many of us know this just from our own involvement with Transform 2020. We've been part of discussions. We understand, where things are going. We already know that there's been an initiative that has put some affirmative action EEO support at Manchester, moving that resource to the system office. So, I know I speak on behalf of a lot of employees, staff in particular, who really, in sharing of services, how is that going to impact, all of us, and not the least our students?
That's a good question. So I speak a little bit on the IT side and then broader skills. So in the IT component of it, there's training involved in each aspect of it. One of the issues we're having with the new networks on the community college side is there's a lot of training credits in there that are never utilized. So each initiative, whether it's regionalization for shared services, has to have a training component in it, and it has to be negotiated with the labor unions, who will ask for that training component. It's that big. So it's a holistic approach to it. You can't ask the governor for $1.7 billion and not have training. And so each of the 36 initiatives has some component of training embedded in it. Mike, you want to-
And I would just add to that, outside of the IT environment, perhaps a little bit more generally. If you look at the enhanced academic offering area in the academic cluster, there is the faculty skill and development component. And I think what you didn't hear today, you could have heard today, which is a broken record. Faculty skill and development is something that's there now, which is just getting started, which you can help shape. So to the extent that you have individual areas of that relate to what you were just talking about, to the extent that you have ideas for how to accomplish that, to the extent that you learn about it and you want to broaden it, this is your opportunity to do that. But I think that's the key area that addresses the question that you raised.
Your point's well taken. We tend to rush towards the goal, leave the employees flounder a little bit, catching up to us. But I think we've got that embedded in most of the initiatives. And if you don't see it, to Mike's point, you need to kick us a little.
And just a mechanical response, because we've talked about get involved. But what I want to do first is also to say, if you have an interest in an area, if you have an interest, for example, in faculty development, President Nunez from Eastern is in fact the leader for that particular initiative. The best way to start this is to send her an email saying, I attended a town hall at Three Rivers. They talked about faculty skill and development. I'm interested in that. Tell me what your vision for that initiative is. And if you want to, you can say, because here's my vision. And get the dialogue started. And talk to her about how this can address the specific areas that you're talking about. So please reach out to her. She's there waiting for these kinds of emails to help define what this initiative looks like and to help define the roadmap for going forward. Thank you. Anything else?
This question, again, coming from a computer science perspective, as
I'll turn off my mic.
college readiness, okay? And in computer science, we have a strong math requirement. In fact, the 4 state universities and Three Rivers in our computer science program, we have Calc 1, Calc 2, and discrete math. Now, we also have to meet the challenges of the 30 credits in our program. One way of doing that is saying, well, our gen ed requirement for quantitative reasoning will be both Calc 1 and discrete math. However, our students coming here, they may need to take pre-algebra, algebra, and pre-calculus. There's not room in our program to do that. So how do we wrestle with that challenge of, and we can't embed those 3 courses?
The president was a little kind when he said we could answer any questions. I think what they're looking at is some of the early college programs to identify those students who have needs that need some remediation. And I agree with you, you can't embed it with 30-30. So we'll have to identify those and try to do some of those early intervention, early college programs, if it's possible to get them up to speed, or they're just going to take longer to get through it. That's the reality of the world we live in. From a personal standpoint, my kids are heading off to college, and they come from a good school district, but they have challenges. Every kid, because they spend more time on that device than they know reading and writing and learning math, they're not prepared. So it's a well-good point. But I think there's some baseline initiatives with the early college program, assessments programs to try to catch those kids early so they don't lose. What happens is they get discouraged and they fall off. The quicker we can identify them, get them through the process, the better success we'll have.
And I think it's fair to say that it is, when we talk about remediation, when talk about subjects that relate to getting kids ready to go to college. We often tend, I think, to fall into the gen ed area. Here we don't have kids who are skilled in this area or skilled in this area. But I think it's also fair to start looking at this in a more targeted way to address the kind of issue that you're talking about. You may not have a specific gen ed concern, but you do have a concern for getting kids into a program which is going to be vital to Connecticut's future as well. So a targeted, focused program like that for early development, I think would be welcome and would be seriously considered as part of, as I said, part of the initiatives that are outlined here.
One other thing to follow up on Mike said, before I came to the board, I was at Eastern. Before that, I was at Hoyok Community College, and we had built these huge tutoring and assessment centers, and they were jam-packed with students who didn't have those abilities to get through the curriculum. So I think we need to invest more in that safety net to get them through it, and we'll need to make sure that's part of the transform safety net. Yes, sir.
Mike Gentry, I'm a relatively new instructor in the technologies department. I spent 30-some years at Northeast Utilities as a manager and director, the last 10 of which was in change management, which I don't see here, and I know that you must be doing it because if you got a group like Boston Consulting, they do it. But a lot of times what happens in programs like this is because of very useful and good things, other things get dropped. And in the tech ed area, we have a number of programs that have been developed over the years that are certificates, that are 1 year, specifically tailored based on industry partners. But a lot of those, like I heard somebody say that the industry around here is saying they need 2-year degrees. Because what I hear a lot of is, I don't care about degrees, I care about skills.
Yeah.
Teach them the following skills and we will give them jobs, and we desperately need them. And that's what a lot of these certificate programs were about. And I don't see anything in there. I assume it's in there, but I worry because when you end up with a 1-year certificate, well, a certain number of those will go on for a 2-year degree, and a certain number of those will go on for 4-year. But many of those programs are specifically about jobs. And if we try to put too many requirements for transfer, we have transfer programs and we do fairly well at it. But if you have a student who comes in and feels that he has a promise that after 60 credits here, he can transfer all those credits to Central, it isn't going to happen unless he carefully chooses the courses. Because many of our programs are made for associate's degree and they'll get a job. We have programs that have 90+% people getting placed into certain industries. Nuclear is one of them, photonics is another. We're one of only 2 or 3 photonics programs in New England. So I guess I caution that don't throw the baby out with the bath.
I think certificate programs are, very important, and it's up to the college to manage that because it's truly a college competency-based system. On transfer, NIASC wants, competency-based gen ed, and that has to be something we wrestle with as we push 60 to the universities. It has to happen. You've got a very aggressive board and a very strong leadership to do this, and I think it's got to fit and it has to fit the NIASC requirements.
You raised about 400 or 500 points, which I'd like to address, but I can't. Let me start by saying this. It's interesting. I talked about businesses and the civic community being involved in this up to this point in a meaningful way, but more so going forward. The business and civic community survey that we took in July, we got all the results from that, said a couple of key things to us. Number one, we want you to help develop student skills. We want to have skilled workforce when they come out, either of the 2-year program or the 4-year program. But just as importantly, we want to have students come out that know how to collaborate with others, that know how to do critical thinking and have critical judgment, that know how to articulate and write. We're very aware of those kinds of things. It isn't just teaching a skill, it's teaching an approach, it's teaching a thought pattern. And the business and civic communities, we sort of develop our managing a balance here. There's some who were at the meeting yesterday at Central who were saying you're captive with the business and industry groups. But we're not. We're trying to do as much for all of these groups as possible. But they're going to help us with their partnerships going forward, roundtable surveys, but also individual involvements. They're going to help us develop those programs. They're going to help us look at the curriculums that we're offering and make sure that we meet both sides of the fence in terms of those needs, the skills and the genetic component. So that's that part of it. In terms of the programs themselves, I think you're going to see that emerge from Transform, because we've all, in our internal discussions, we've all talked a great deal about that. How do we prepare these students for whatever role they decide to have in life? As I said before, it can't just be the skills. It has to be the rest of the picture, the rest of the puzzle as well. So I think you'll see things emerging. I'm going to go back to what I said before. And obviously, we could use your help in that area as well, because you've got some very definitive experience that you're referring to, but you also have some definitive needs that I think we can help address.
I think one of the examples I could give my engineering and tech partners here is that we always educated a nurse at the associate degree level that can practice safely and competently. However, it's the industry that is really dictating where we're going. And while we've debated the BSN education topic for 4 or 5 decades now, the industry is now making the decision that the nurse be educated at the baccalaureate level. And, Alan and George and I were sitting down and looking at a new degree, Health Information Technology, where previously you would think that would just require a certificate and the individual could be employed. However, that's not the case. They're looking at associate degree, baccalaureate, and even master's prepared people, because it's complicated out there. Things are complex, and people need to understand at a systems level. Another example I'll give you, and this is how we've informed ourselves in nursing and the approach that we're taking with the RN to BSN. Three Rivers participated in a gap analysis with an unnamed institution and a practice partner. And it was very important to bring the practice partner in on this research, or this gap analysis. What we learned was that we weren't graduating a nurse that understood things at a systems level. Could they practice safely? Absolutely. But did they understand a safety culture? We realized that no, not so much. So these are the things that we're focusing on in baccalaureate education. We will continue to graduate the nurse at the associate degree level, but we will make sure that they continue their education always.
And you should be complimented for that.
This is a continuation of what Louise in HR was saying earlier. Earlier this year, I heard that there's going to be 4 changes in 4 areas of the college: financial aid, admissions, HR, and purchasing. And that there would be some processes handled on campus and some at another location. Can you talk more about that?
Well, the CIO, I can tell you, it's really hard to do that when you have 7 different ERP systems. So maybe a goal, an end goal. I think it's probably HR, and I spent 15 months in HR, believe it or not, at Eastern before I went to the board, because HR system is core, so it's probably a little easier to do it at that level, but then again, your HR staff at the campuses are so thin, you still have to have HR staff here to in-process and process people out. Financial aid, we have an option with a software as a service to process financial aid and admissions, but as being a CIO at a campus, I'm not going to tell the president of the campus that this is how it's going to be done. This is a menu of options that we have available to you to create efficiencies. On the university side, the faster you admit someone, the faster you award aid, the faster they sign on the bottom line that they're committed to you, you get to move on to the next student. And more students mean more enrollment, mean more revenue. On the community college side, it's a different animal. You have open admissions. You have one form. At the universities, it's a Common App, it's an SAT score, it's an essay, it's a competency-based admissions process. So there are all these initiatives, there are all these options, but at the end of the day, God help us, it has to be the campus president that picks and chooses what fits that campus best, create efficiencies and synergy for your students. That's all I look at. So is it something they're looking at? Yes. Is it going to happen tomorrow? It's very difficult to move someone out of here up to Hartford or regionally to process purchase orders when there's multiple ERP systems that they're processing. It's just that simple. So you're going to spend $40 million to buy one ERP system so you can process purchase orders efficiently? I don't think so. That's the rate. And a lot of people make various statements, but the reality of it, there has to be a cost-benefit analysis done on the initiative. They got to make sense. Our biggest problem is labor costs. Maybe 70–80% of our operating budget is labor. That's where we need to become more efficient. You got a question over there?
I have a real quick question, and hopefully an easy one. My name's Marie, and I'm in nursing. Is there a central list of the different initiatives and who the appropriate contact person would be if someone wanted to get involved?
It was right in the PowerPoint.
It's in PowerPoint, but there's also some available here.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can
beautiful.
take them with you.
Here being where?
On the table over there.
Perfect,
They don't
thank
have
you.
the email addresses on.
No, they didn't. Should, unless we
Yeah.
have a bad copy.
No, they may have an earlier copy. Here's what I will do. When I get back to the office, I will email it to Ann Branchini, and she will make it available for you. Glenn pointed that out. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Diva Conviro, and I want to talk again about some of the things that we've been discussing today. I think that it's really important that between Mike, who talked, and the computer sciences, who talked about integrated technology and certificates, and then Edie, who spoke about nursing, we're a very diverse college. My students who are in engineering technology, they go on for their PhDs. I've got students right now at UConn working on their PhDs. The Civil Engineering Technology program has a great articulation agreement with UConn. I know that Dr. Gray doesn't want to hear that, but they do have options. And I think it's important that our students continue to have those options and that we continue to work with all the universities in the state of Connecticut and not just the CSCUs. With that said, again, we have certificates, we have students that need to go on to get their bachelor's degrees, and some that need to go on and want to go on to get their PhDs. The civil engineers in the state legislature right now, anyone who practices in civil engineering within a few years will need a master's degree. So that's just for your information. So we do have certificates, we have ways to get students into universities for their bachelor degrees and to continue their education. It's not just, you get a job, and it's not just for a teacher associate's degree. It could be in many different ways. And so we're very diverse, is all I want to point out. Thank you.
And thank you for mentioning that, by the way, just from a personal perspective. My dad was a civil engineer, worked for 38 years for the city of Hartford as a civil engineer, and then went into private practice as doing the same thing. So, anything else? I think, all of us have other things we want to do this afternoon, but we want to give you the time that you need or want. So, anything else? Okay. Then I would say thank you very, very much for coming here. I would say, Steve, thanks for all your help in setting this up today. Amber and Keeney did a great job transitioning this from the thought process